I was born in Iran in 1980, so this is just a year after the Islamic Revolution. My family in Iran was probably a middle-class family, and I had an older sister and lived in Iran till I was 4, and we immigrated to the US in 1984.
I was raised basically in this bicultural household. My parents spoke English to each other, but there were always Iranians around. My dad has a lot of Iranian friends, and my father was raised as a Muslim but is non-practicing at this point, and so I was exposed to a lot of different things.
I'm a PhD student in the Culture and Theory program at UC Irvine, which is interdisciplinary. It accounts for things like ethnic studies and women's studies. And my dissertation project is actually about what it means to be queer in Iran.
I'm pretty bicultural, and so I felt most of my life pretty strongly influenced both by American ideals and values around dating and when you should date and how dating should look, but also a very different set of values within the Iranian community about that. The values in my home actually weren't, my family isn't particularly conservative or strict, but there was still this idea of what's the point of dating, why do you need to date, wait till you're ready to get married type of message that my mom on the one hand adhered to it because she was an Iranian woman, and this was post-Islamic Revolution. She also, a part of her, wanted better for us, so I felt like I went through a typical struggle that a lot of Iranian American youth go through in terms of trying to educate their parents on, well, here's how it's done here, and kind of really fighting for that.
In 2007, the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, actually went to Columbia University during his visit to a UN meeting, and he gave this speech in which part of it said, "We don't have gay people in our country like you do in yours," meaning in the United States. But what's really interesting is at the onset of the Islamic Republic in 1979, when the revolutionary efforts were kind of usurped towards Islamic ends, shortly after, Khomeini, which is credited as the father of the revolution, also became credited as the first Islamic scientist to think about sex change. Because shortly after, he was in power, he issued a fatwa, basically saying that sex change surgeries were okay. So it's interesting that though Iran says gay people don't exist, they actually fully fund and subsidize and actually support sex change surgery. But as soon as someone vocalizes some kind of non-normative gender or sexual identification or desire, it gets funneled through the institutions of the state, right? And so that's where I think it becomes pathologized and tries to be corrected. And there are people who say, I would never have done this if I didn't live in Iran, right? So it's based on wanting better living conditions and better life chances more than it is because they feel like they were born in the wrong body. And to me, that's a real violence to do that to people.
There's essentially no dialogue around LGBTQ issues at all within the Iranian American community. It's just a completely missing discourse. There's very little language for it that's not derogatory. There's very little understanding of it. There's a general sense of sort of a politically correct sense of, treating everyone well and not judging people, but when it really comes down to the specifics of that community, the dialogue is so missing that I feel that my sense is that to be an Iranian American person who also identifies as LGBTQ, you essentially have a choice to either, you have to essentially suppress one part of your identity or the other. I either have to be Iranian American, so I can stay within the community and suppress my LGBTQ identity, or if I want to not suppress my LGBTQ identity, I need to leave the Iranian American community because there's no real space for it.
I have several very good friends who are gay, lesbian, and Iranian American, and I know that for each of them, when they first came out to their parents, it was very, very difficult. And I think that it took them a while to kind of find middle ground with their parents, and ultimately, in the case of most of my friends, their parents truly, have loving parents and they accepted them. But I think it is unfortunate. I think some of the ideas about homosexuality.
In the Iranian American community, there's a lot of value placed on what people outside of the family think of you and how they view you. We call it mardom, like what are mardom gonna think, and it's very important that we please everyone around us. That's the immediate, the extended family, but also just the immediate community and the people that we associate with. So I think it's a more of a societal issue, is that there's an assumption that if you're, for example, a gay male, that means you want to be a woman. There's a lot of confusion around gender and sexual orientation, and I don't think yet we've come to a place where we are very clearly delineated between the two things, or even as I said, because there's not much of a discourse, there's not much opportunity to even have that discussion about there's a difference between gender expression and sexual orientation and all these things. And so there's this assumption, I think, in terms of stereotypes and stigma around, for example, a gay man being feminine or wanting to be female or not wanting to be a man.
So I think it's really important to distinguish between what it means to be gay in Iran and what it means to be queer in Iran. Because to be gay is to out oneself in a way that really mimics Western notions of gayness, right? The post-Will and Grace Glee kind of moment. And it's that alignment with the West that's actually problematic for the post-revolutionary state. And so it's interesting the ways in which queer and ambiguous sexualities exist. They exist in multitudes. They're not named and outed and categorized and typed. What's really famous in the news, right, are these pictures of young boys that are being hanged in cities like Mashhad, which is a more religious center of the country, and for being outed as gay. And so a lot of this is not so much the government's role, but it's also the role of the community and the family, right? Because if someone comes out as being gay, right, it's not really a problem unless it's reported, right? So there's really kind of an overall ethos, right, that's not really reducible to the Iranian government or to the Iranian family or to the Iranian community or neighborhood, that this is kind of an ethical imperative in some way, and I think that's really interesting. And I think it makes the question of the government's role a little more hazy.
I did a little bit of research, and I think I've found one article on LGBTQ population within the Iranian American community, and the one thing that study showed is that actually lesbian and gay Iranian Americans who have family support actually fare even better than American LGBTQs who have family support. That one factor is unbelievably important for them because of the collectivistic value of the culture, but it's one of the most difficult pieces for them to get for themselves.
One of my best friends from home, from Rochester, New York, is a gay Iranian male who is 36 years old now, and I met him I think 5 years ago when he came to the United States for his medical residency, and he knew from a young age that he was gay and lived in Iran, of course, and I think had his first sort of experiences with men when he was in the Army, actually. So all of that was in secret, and so when he moved to the United States, he came out of the closet officially and started dating and actually entered into long-term relationships, and to this day hasn't told his parents back in Iran, and I know that it kills him. It's incredibly difficult because he he's 36, he's getting a lot of pressure to get married at this point, and really seems to have no choice. Basically has to live this lie, and when he talks to his parents on the phone, he avoids the question, or I don't know if he says he has girlfriends or what, but it's very incredibly stressful, I imagine, and feel awful for him. But it's definitely an issue I think he's going to have to figure out over the next couple of years.
I don't see it evolving too much in Iran, though I have not been there since I was 4, so I have my finger less on the pulse of that. But I do see it evolving in terms of the Iranian American community, and I think part of that is because as Iranian Americans, we do need the safety net of American culture to be able to evolve around some of these issues. We may view ourselves as white and part of that privileged population, but the privileged population does not view us as white. So we're actually doing ourselves a disservice by not aligning with other people of color and other minorities. And once I think that shift starts to happen, I think you'll see more mobility on a lot of issues, including LGBTQ issues.